This week, we welcome Travis Isaacson, Technical Expertise Manager at Detectify, to discuss how to optimize your buying criteria to ensure success of your new security tools. In the Leadership and Communication section, 3 effective ways to improve your internal communication to boost employee engagement, 4 immediate measures to execute after a cyber attack, 17 cyber insurance application questions you'll need to answer, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly. Cybercriminals are using social engineering loaded with urgency and fear to successfully prey on victims, your employees, or your customers. Protect your Office 365 email from today's most sophisticated attacks with Barracuda Email Threat Scanner. It's a free tool to help protect your business from these hard-to-detect attacks. The Barracuda Email Threat Scanner uses artificial intelligence to hunt and eliminate Office 365 email threats. Find the cybersecurity threats hiding in your Office 365 email right now. Get your free email threat scan at securityweekly.com/Barracuda. We're proud to announce CISO Stories, a new podcast series in partnership with Cybersecurity Collaborative and Cyber Reason. CISO Stories features the candid perspectives and experiences of frontline senior security executives and dives deep into timely security topics. CISO Stories is hosted by Todd Fitzgerald, VP of Cybersecurity Strategy at Cybersecurity Collaborative, and Sam Curry, Chief Product and Security Officer at Cyber Reason. Listen weekly as they speak with extraordinary CISOs by visiting securityweekly.com/CSP.
Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 219, recorded June 7th, 2021. I am your host, Matt Alderman, here in Colorado. It is finally warmed up. I'm in a polo for once. I mean, holy cow. Paul's out this week because I think it's Dean's birthday. It's one of the kids' birthdays. Oh, it's Luke's birthday. Sorry. Which means both of my hosts are joining remotely today. First, Mr. Jason Albuquerque. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, it's great to be here. It's been 90 plus here all weekend in New England. So I spent my day at Gillette Stadium yesterday. I got a nice red forehead. We were at Professional Lacrosse League opening weekend.
Wow, nice. It was warm here as well. I might have a little redness up there too. Joining us today, filling in for Paul, is Mr. Adrian Sanabria. Welcome, Adrian.
Hey, always good to be here. I don't think we've seen really much in the 90s yet here in Knoxville, Tennessee. That's odd.
Yeah, it is odd. Usually a little hot and humid down there, right?
Oh, we got the humidity. You know, if you add in the what it feels like from the humidity, yeah, we're in the hundreds. It's like breathing soup.
Oh, lovely. Security Weekly is proud to announce that we will be at Infosec World 2021 in person, October 25th to 27th, 2021. This year, our annual partnership with Infosec World is extra special as we are both business units under the Cyber Risk Alliance brand. What does that mean for Security Weekly listeners and Infosec World attendees? You will get to see and hear from many of the Security Weekly team at the event, and you'll save 20% off your World Pass. Visit securityweekly.com/ISW 2021 to register using our discount code. Do you want to stay in the loop on all things Security Weekly? Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe on your favorite podcast catcher, our YouTube channel, sign up for our mailing list, join our Discord server, or follow us on our newest live streaming platform, Twitch. This segment is sponsored by Detectify. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/Detectify. Travis Isaacson is Technical Expertise Manager at Detectify, where he helps customer security teams utilize the latest crowdsourced vulnerability research in their automated security practices and keep web apps secure. Travis has a background in supply chain logistics and digital ad tech. Outside of office hours, he enjoys dabbling in ethical hacking and bug bounties. Travis, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you very much for having me.
We're going to talk about how to select security tools. We're going to focus on AppSec. I'm going to start this by saying AppSec's a really big space, right? I think during our prep call, I rattled off 6 or 7 different submarkets of AppSec. We have static analysis, software composition analysis, container security, infrastructure as code. Then I got IAST, interactive testing, dynamic testing, web app firewalls. When I think about the selection criteria for an AppSec program, I guess the first question is, where should I start? Should I start left, right, middle? I don't know where to start.
That's a very good question. And I think a lot of people are very perplexed as to where they should start, because not only is there multiple areas in which you can start, but multiple tools in which can help you in those areas. But I think fundamentally you have to look at your actual applications and see who the end user is and where it is that you might actually get hacked. Typically, is it in your infrastructure? Is it in your static code? Is it in your staging environment? Typically, especially where if you're doing bug bounty or doing automation work or even getting hacked by somebody nefarious, they would typically find that in your production environment in which you have released.
Yeah, and I think the production environment is where we have a lot of legacy applications that we may not even know about, right? Like some marketing team or some other group deployed an application. Security team may not even know the thing exists. So if I focus on the right and I focus on production, what is inventory kind of the first step then to like kind of get your arms around what even exists in your application inventory?
Definitely. I mean, understanding what you've got into your house, whether or not you've got an old and existing legacy application in which you're trying to port into, say, a cloud environment, or as some ad hoc system in which you've pieced together from random custom built applications to try and make it as your own. Typically, there's going to be some sort of abandonware, which is just going to sit and fall through the cracks or sit there loitering. So that Christmas campaign that your marketing team made 6 years ago that installed a Flash player on that little application in which they were meant to host for one day, it turned out to sit there for 6 years. Those are the sorts of things in which you would really want to clean up, because those are the areas in which you can easily gain access.
Yeah, and I think that's where we run into some very interesting scenarios, right? Is I don't know it exists, and it creates an entry point somewhere else. You know, it could have been Java, could have been Flash, it could have been WordPress, right? Because we've seen a ton of WordPress vulnerability, especially around plugins. I mean, those are very interesting potential attack vectors that some organizations may not even know about.
Definitely. And I think it's also to do with maintenance and understanding what technologies that you're actually using. If you're using an outdated suite and you're trying to update it to the latest tech, or some of your remote developers are sitting and they're using a language with outdated libraries that you just didn't know about, then that can have a huge impact on your organization.
Right. All right. So let's say I need to start on the right. We'll get to the left later, I think, because I want to tie it together. So if I start on the right and I start in production, as I think about the approach and what tools do I need, I think you have to kind of map out kind of like what's the process? Like, how do you start? What's the recommended flow of how do you start in production?
I think first and foremost, you've got to look and see what your tech stack is built and where is it actually built. Are you hosting it on AWS? Are you using Azure services? Do you have a series of different CDN providers which are spinning up different instances? These are the sorts of areas in which you really want to take focus on, because those are typically where, say, subdomains are created. And those subdomains is where that abandonware will typically sit. So once you've got an inventory of that, either by mapping it out individually directly from your zone files that you're able to pull from your hosting provider, or using some sort of automated system in order to take account of there. Only then, once you actually know how wide your domain structure is, can you start assessing the vulnerabilities that potentially could be sitting there.
Now, if you don't have those tools, do you then look to the hacker community or the bug bounty communities, or is that too far? Is that the cart too far in front of that horse?
It depends on how mature your organization is. If you've got a team which is prepared to sit up essentially 2 weeks, 24/7, taking in bug bounty reports from different communities and platforms, then by all means, you're welcome to do so. But typically you would want to have some sort of automatic scanner, which is able to pick those up. And those automatic scanners that you have, you would want to have it from the knowledge of the people that are actually hacking your systems, or at least the ones which are non-nefarious. So they'll be able to give you some sort of leverage into the way in which people will try and crack into your applications. Now, automatic scanners by any means are not the silver bullet in which everybody hopes that they would be, but properly complemented with, say, a bug bounty program, then that would definitely be a step in the right direction.
Yeah, agreed. Because I think what most organizations are not prepared for is if they start a bug bounty program or they go out and hire a pen testing firm, what do you do with all the results? Like, because when they come, you need to be prepared to do something about it. And if you haven't even thought about the rest of the process side of AppSec, I mean, that could be a little challenging for most organizations.
I mean, Matt, to your point, right? I mean, we're talking about starting on the left or starting on the right, and I don't personally, I don't think it's an either or scenario. I strongly believe we should be doing both, because there's so much information that comes out of organic relationships with business units that you can be getting some critical intel just having conversations with your marketing leader, right? About net new technologies, net new services they want to offer. And through those conversations, you can get that, oh, by the way, 6 years ago, we had that marketing program that we did XYZ with. And you start getting that intel organically while you're, trying to figure out what you have today. I think it's honestly, I think they run in tandem. It's not one or the other.
And just to clarify for myself as well as others, when we're talking left, right here, we're not getting political, right? Like we're so
pre-prod and prod left, pre-production. The
right.
CI/CD pipeline, right? Yep. Is I'm in production and my app is now ready to be hacked.
Yeah. And my point is, there's so much that can organically come out of those pre-production conversations about legacy environments when you're part of that conversation.
Right. So left is as far as you can get when you start writing code, right? And right is pushing it into production, right?
Having it running in production, yeah.
Yeah.
Having it running. Okay. Yeah, just to make sure I was clear on that. Yeah.
And I think it's also dependent on what sort of application in which you're actually got, or what something that you potentially have inherited as a CISO. If you've got a monolithic application which takes ages and ages to deploy, obviously that's not something in which you're going to be consistently being able to scan. But if you're saying we're doing updates 4, 5, 6 times a day on a single application, then that's something that you would be testing both stages at. In this instance, there's no real right or wrong, and the shift left mentality in which a lot of people are moving towards isn't necessarily the correct one, depending on the organizational structure that you have and the willingness and ability for not only your security teams, but your engineering teams and your environmental teams to be able to work together.
Yeah, and I think this is where some of the criteria gets really interesting to me when we think about this, right? Is we've got people, process, technology, right? And there's a lot of tools in the AppSec space. But if they're not brought together in an effective way, I mean, how do you know what are the right people, process, and tools I need to have in place in order to drive this, right? And what I'm trying to guide here for the audience is, I know I have stuff running in production. I may or may not have a relationship with my DevOps teams. I probably need to get one, right? And so how do you start to leverage what you have and figure out where you're going? To Jason's point, to start to bring these pieces together, because when I think about success of a security program, and in this particular context, application security, the ability to integrate and collaborate across all the different tools and processes is going to be a critical success criteria.
Definitely. And depending on how you communicate to your developers is also very important as to not only your application health, but the timely manner in which you're able to address these security issues. If you happen to be like some people that I've heard of, that anytime they have an alert from their security tool, it simply sends an email into a junk folder in which is never touched. That's not the ideal or optimal process in which the CISO, when purchasing in this technology or scanning tool, has planned or envisioned. So it's really got to have the buy-in of the people that are going to be working with it, but setting what that success criteria could be, whether or not it's simply a decrease in the amount of vulnerabilities which could potentially be present, or just peace of mind that knowing that you have security tools that are running so that you can say, well, I've got this box checked, this is compliance covered.
Right. I think in the other thing I don't think we want is what we used to do in the device vulnerability management days, where I have a lot of expertise, is go out, scan everything, take this big PDF file, throw it over the fence and say, hey guys, go fix all this, right? Because that's not going to work either.
Never has.
And I think long are those days hopefully behind us, considering, especially now in the working from home environment that we have and the tools in which we can collaborate with each other. There is so many that are around, so you can have direct integrations or APIs, which is being able to speak to each other, pulling in the relevant information. And I think trying to make sure that the relevant information and digestible information is in front of the right people at the right time is what's going to set your security program apart. Because it not only will give your engineers digestible information in which they can action upon almost directly, because they're able to see what the request response code that is coming out of it, but in the instance in which they're unsure of that, be able to have proper remediation advice or examples as to how this particular vulnerability came about. So they not only become better engineers, but they can teach not only their peers, but their colleagues at the same time.
I think the other big factor here that we have to think about as we're outlining the criteria for success is frequency. Again, I go back to my device vulnerability management days where if I could get a client to scan their network once a month, that was like a miracle. I mean, when we're in the AppSec space and we're at the frequency we are now, we're talking daily or potentially even multiple times a day. So frequency has to play a critical component into your evaluation criteria because things are moving so fast.
Yeah, and I think automation plays a very key part in it. Like you mentioned about getting the PDF of the report and then sending it directly to somebody. That's something in which is just a step in the process of being able to provide that information for people. But think about trying to update your actual scanner itself, trying to get in new vulnerabilities, or you've read something that has just come out online or a couple of hours ago, and you're wondering, well, is my organization vulnerable for that? Is it something that I can actually affect now? Like, velocity is really the key when it comes to that. And you should be having something which is populated as quick as possible. In certain instances, even say 15 minutes shouldn't be unreasonable to be able to have a module directly from the crowdsource or hacker community directly into a scanner in which you're working with.
Yeah, that was my second point, which is just the attack surface is changing quickly too. So it's not only the frequency of deployment and getting your applications published and into production, it's also the entire attack surface on the other side, and the techniques and the exploits are rapidly changing as well. And it's the balance of those two different components is going to be critical to secure these applications.
Yeah, and Matt, it just shows how important the people, the process, and the culture is, right? It has to be, because the staff, the engineers need to be empowered to do those type of things, right? And we'll never have that level of scalability if it's not a shared responsibility across the organization, and our engineering team isn't empowered to handle those type of scenarios, those types of vulnerabilities, as they come through the door. We need to be scalable. We need to be agile. And ultimately, we're under a pressure today to keep the business running, right? So there's a level of pressure coming in from the business, and then there's a level of pressure coming in saying, hey, listen, we want to have a culture of security. when the odds come together, which one wins, right? So we got to build a culture where we're focused on that security by design in everything we do. And it has to be a shared responsibility outside of just the security team. We have to have that arm within the development team that they're empowered to be security engineers as well.
Yeah, and you always know those organizations when you run into them because, if they're looking for a pen testing company and they're having those initial chats, and you talk about shipping them a PDF of the results, that some of those orgs are going to look at you like you're a time traveler, come to the future.
Yeah.
And they're going to tell you that's not really the way we do things anymore. Most of the pen test companies we work with these days, and I think you still find the gamut across pen testing. Some of them actually have collaborative portals where your developers can have a login and see the results as the pen test goes. And then others will give you several formats that you can use to ingest the results of the pen test into whatever system whatever your workflow is for getting those to the people that need to triage them and validate them and fix them.
Yeah, so that integration piece is critical, right? Because there are going to be a lot of other systems at play here in the DevOps space, right? The IDEs, the ticketing tools, there's a lot of other places where development and engineering is happening outside of a security realm, Travis. So integration and the ability to integrate with those other products are going to be very important in the criteria as well.
Of course, and collaboration is definitely the key factor in this, because security should never be seen as a blocker. It should be more seen as an enabler. So not only are they able to help them to create better, cleaner code in which is more secure, but also in the instance in which they do have vulnerabilities, that they're able to have time-saving cost metric systems which allow them to be able to get out their applications in time. I don't think any CISO worth his grain of salt would have a security test sitting within their CI/CD pipeline and blocking the deployment of an application just because it didn't match a certain speed. It's better off pushing that, getting that out live, understanding what potential vulnerabilities will exist, and then fix them as soon as possible.
I was waiting for Jason because I thought he was going to have a comment there for a second. But so let me think about, so frame this right. We start in our production environments. We start to gather an inventory. We pull together our tech stack. We start to identify vulnerabilities. Now we start to integrate to the left and the tools in the left to create collaboration. And we start to build out what our holistic application security program looks like. So here's my next question. What does success look like? How do you measure success of the different people, process, and tool integrations that you just spent the time building? How do you measure the successful outcomes? How do you look at that, Travis?
I think the very first thing that you mentioned, people. People are the ultimate driving factor when it comes to security, whether or not it's coming from a zero trust policy in which they have for the code in which they write or they deploy, or the time in which they actually spend developing applications, pushing it, approving it, or sitting, fixing vulnerabilities, understanding it. So the shortened amount of time in which you can actually provide to that development team or the people that are sitting within security is a pure win factor. And the shorter time that you can shorten that process is only going to be beneficial for the organization.
So are we looking at metrics like time to release, time to fix, those types of metrics that we would use to kind of measure the success of our program?
Definitely. And I think a reduction in false positives is also very, very high when speaking in the security space, because the amount of time when the boy cried wolf, as one would put it, if you spend 6 hours trying to fix a vulnerability that doesn't exist or trying to find out whether or not an application in which you have deployed has potentially been compromised, that could have been 6 hours you spent building a new feature or training a staff member or deploying something new in which you've been waiting within your backlog.
Right. Yeah. It all critical components. What other things can we measure? I mean, what things should CISOs be thinking about when it comes to other metrics that they should be thinking about tracking to eventually roll up, right? I mean, at some point, somebody's going to want to justify the spend on the people and the tools and justify their budgets for future investment. Are there other metrics we should think about outside of the people time reduction, false positive aspects?
You can even think in just terms of your own tooling. So say, for instance, that you had your own server running, which was you downloaded something from open source, you've tried to maintain that tool, and it's sitting on a server and just ticking away, like checking your applications over and over and over again. And that could have been one of those abandonware or loitering applications in which somebody forgot about, somebody moves within the organization. It's like cybersecurity is a relatively hot industry when it comes to talent because the pool is so small. So the likelihood of somebody having a tool or something running in which the next person that inherits it comes along and is like, oh, what's this? This server has been running for 3 years and it has cost the company thousands and thousands of dollars. So just being able to clean up that is definitely a win factor.
You don't have any experience with that, Jason, do you?
Well, at the end of the day, it's that technical debt conversation we have a lot around here, right? That's something that, you know me, I have that risk mitigation mindset, right? It's one of those scenarios where the metrics that I bring to my CEO are twofold. How did I reduce risk? And how did I enable us to grow from a revenue perspective? So those are the two main buckets that I think about. How did I enable opportunity? How did I reduce risk? Those are great conversations to have with a CEO or a board member. And then you start ticking off those KPIs that ultimately you led to those two buckets. Because you want to be a business enabler as a cybersecurity expert, as a cybersecurity leader. You want to be helping drive revenue. You want to be integrated into the strategic side of the business. Otherwise, you're not going to have that seat at the table.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in some of the news articles.
Sorry, Matt. I was just thinking on that train of thought, you could potentially even shift the way in which your applications are deployed so that you create a much speedier process of being able to deliver those applications, which in turn grows your ROI.
Right. I mean, I think speed to market helps enable the business, which is that bucket of enabling the business and the revenue model. Looking at how you reduce risk and resolving critical vulnerabilities to reduce that attack surface and that potential risk is on the other side of Jason's points, right? And you have to look at it from both sides because those factors are going to be important.
And they're going to come in front of you one day, and you're going to be challenged with the decision that you have to make. Do we reduce risk or do we go speed to market? Because sometimes it can't be both. Many times you can. But there are instances where the risk is too high, and it's ultimately a decision of business unit leaders and the leadership of the organization on whether or not they want to accept that risk. And you need to be able to have those conversations and facilitate those conversations.
Right. And understand the underlying risk areas and components to have that conversation with the business units, right?
Absolutely, especially in regulated environments. Environments where you have to worry about fines, GDPR type fines, right? You need to be able to have those deep conversations that say the risk, outweighs the benefit of going to market quicker. And it's something that we need to kind of take a step back and pause on. Those conversations will happen where you have to have that, that decision making. And it's not the CISO by themselves making that decision. It's the business that has to make that decision.
Absolutely. Travis.
So
go ahead, Adrian.
I was going to say, Travis, is there anything interesting you learned writing a kid's book?
I learned many things writing a kid's book, specifically in trying to teach them new elements about the world in which previously weren't in existence. Hence why we went for an ABC book in which you could sort of develop a part of a child's mind in which you've never seen before, and try and connect them to a bit more of a modern day society. Because trying to teach your kid xylophone instead of X-ray, it's a little bit different.
Can you write one of those for CISOs and AppSec? Maybe. I mean, we sometimes we have to think about that, right? I mean,
Yeah.
right. I'm just saying we need
board
the
books
ABC
for the
book.
boardroom.
Right.
Funny that you mentioned that. I do actually have one in which I have planned in the works, but fundamentally thinking from a child's perspective. But I definitely think that the parents who potentially could be CISOs could be then reading it to their children and pick up a few pointers or two.
Yes.
Nice.
I'm sure we'd be willing to collaborate on the CISO version with you, no doubt.
Yeah, for
That
sure.
would be amazing.
Yeah, I still learn like a child some days. It's just like the basics. Just iterate it over. I'll learn it eventually. Travis, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thank you so much for having me.
To learn more about Detectify or how to optimize your security investments, please visit securityweekly.com/Detectify. We're going to take a quick break and then cover the leadership and communications articles for this week.